So let us begin this meeting with the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Namaste and welcome once again to you. So these letters, we have completed the first and the second part. And before we go on to today's part 3, I'll take a quick summary of what we have covered in part 2. Okay. So letter number A, B, and C. Letter number 70A are the questions from Hume. Letter number 70B are the questions from Sinnett. And letter number 70C were the answers which were given by Mahatma KH to both of them. All these letters were written in 1882. So in part 2, we have seen that Mahatma Ji explained memory in the Devachanic state is not real remembrance, because only a very narrow spectrum, which consists of only the happy and joyful memories, that is created by thought. So it is not the complete remembrance. And these thoughts of immortal love, they are rooted in our sixth principle, that is buddhi. Then even though Devachanic period will last for many, many hundreds of years when compared to the time period of Earth, but it appears just like a second in eternity. So it does not seem boring or monotonous, just like a second in eternity. And it is our actions on earth which determine the state of Devachan and also Avicci. Then Mahatma Ji has clearly mentioned that at the hour of death, all events of life, they pass in front of the inner eye in the minutest detail. And the feeling which is the strongest at that time, it determines our future existence. Now, yesterday when I was thinking about it, I was preparing for this part 3, I also thought about the thing like the cycle of sleeping and waking. It is very much similar to the cycle of death and rebirth. So it is said that whatever is your last thought before you go to sleep, that determines your quality of sleep. And also it becomes the first thought when you wake up. So we should always go to sleep with some good thought, or by chanting some good mantra like Om or something in which we remember God. Now, further in that letter, in part 2, we have seen that the full remembrance of our lives, it will come only at the end of the minor cycle. That means at the completion of 7 rounds, when the planetary pralay is just about to start. So what is meant by immortality? Immortality means unlimited sentient existence. There is no gap in self-consciousness. But in all cases of death, which includes suicide and death by accident, the soul becomes unconscious and loses all remembrance. That is why it is not immortal. Then a person, when he is dying, unconsciously, he may project his Mayavi Roop. And only adepts and sorcerers, they know that they are dead in their physical body. The rest all, they lose remembrance. But adepts and sorcerers, they know that they are dead in the physical body. Now, what do adepts or initiates consider true immortality? They consider that only the universal one life is truly immortal. All definitions of immortality by different cultures and religions, they pertain to unbroken consciousness through some finite period. This is very important. It is unbroken consciousness, but it is limited to a finite period. However long that period may be, whether one round or one manvantar or even a solar manvantar, but it is limited or a finite period. And after that period, the individual has to take birth again, make the same effort to attain his immortality in another such period. Then there are men among us now who may become such mighty beings. They may become immortal for remainder of all the rounds. Then they become highest Chauhans or the planetary spirits. So till here, that is slide number 22, we have completed. And now let's see further from slide 23 onwards. So 22, we said that. And then they will take their appointed place, those exalted men who remain immortal for all the remainder of the rounds. They become the highest Dhyan Chauhans and the planetary conscious ego spirits or the planetary spirits. Now further Mahatma Ji mentioned, of course, the monad never perishes whatever happens. But Eliphas Levi speaks of the personal, not the spiritual egos. And you have fallen into the same mistake, and very naturally too as CCM. So Mahatma Ji is clarifying that here we are discussing about the immortality of the personal ego. That means the individual, which is Atma, Buddhi, Manas. And spiritual ego is only Atma, Buddhi. Manas is not there. So it is actually the Manas which creates the individuality. And this individual, we are speaking about the immortality of this individual, Atma, Buddhi, Manas. As Manas becomes more and more purified, and when it becomes fully purified, it retains the awareness of being the same individual from one incarnation to the next. This we discussed last time. And this is possible only by personal effort to purify the mind, because our mind is steeped in matter. When it is purified, it will retain that remembrance of its identity. Therefore, personal immortality is conditional, because that effort has to be made to purify the mind to enable it to retain the identity. So this personal immortality or the individuality, so immortality of that, it is conditional. But the spiritual ego which is Atma Buddhi, the monad, the spiritual ego is immortal throughout the Mahamanvantar. That is as per the universal law. The monad has to complete its complete cycle of round through all the forms in that universe. So that is the universal law. The monad, that is Atma Buddhi, it never perishes. But whatever is the memory of this monad, this Atma Buddhi, that is generally not retained during incarnations in human body, because it is eclipsed by the Manas. So universal or the immortality of monad, that is spiritual individuality, that persists throughout the Mahamanvantar. But personal immortality, that is conditional. And this was the confusion which Sinnett had, and also C.C. Massey, that how can immortality of man be conditional? They thought it is unconditional. This was their question. Then further, Sinnett is asking, but again, is it conceivable that a spiritual monad, though surviving the rejection of its third and fourth round pages, cannot survive the rejection of fifth and sixth round pages? We were talking about pages in our last session. Rejection of a page means that any one lifetime, it is not very well lived. Perhaps the person was so oriented towards material selfishness that there was nothing noble or spiritual about his lifetime when the lifetime closed. So there was nothing which he could carry forward into the higher planes. The link between his personality and monad, that may be broken. So that life page gets rejected because nothing of it is added into the big book of life of the monad. And that failure to lead good lives in these rounds means the annihilation of the whole individual, who will never then get to the seventh round at all. So for this, Mahatma Ji is saying it is certainly inconceivable. This cannot happen. Therefore, there is no mortal use to discuss the subject. The question itself is misconceived. In the next question, Sinnett continues, but on the other hand, if that were so, the Eliphas Levi case would not be met by such a hypothesis, For long before then, the individuals who had become co-workers with nature for evil would have been themselves annihilated by the obscuration of the planet X between the fifth and sixth rounds, if not by the obscuration between the fourth and fifth. For to every round there is one obscuration, we are told. So Sennett is still persisting with his question that a person who has acquired full occult knowledge of nature and applies it to evil, that person will also perish at the end of any of the rounds. Because after completion of the round, the planet goes into a dormant state. It goes into obscuration. And all the forms evolving on that planet, they disintegrate. Which means that such people cannot remain immortal beyond a round. This is his question. Mahatma Ji says, you misconceived the teaching because you were not aware of what you are now told. First, who are the true co-workers with nature? And second, that it is by no means all the evil co-workers who drop into the eighth sphere and are annihilated. So Sennett had again some misconception. He was not given the knowledge who are the real co-workers with nature. What do we mean by co-worker with nature? First of all, what is the work of nature? Nature will create, preserve, and destroy. And adepts are the co-workers for good. They will work for creation and preservation. Their work is such. And sorcerers, by applying their knowledge to evil, they become co-workers in the destruction process of nature because their work is evil. So evil, yes, it brings destruction, but still that is also one of nature's work. So they are co-workers of nature. Now see, this appears so surprising to us that sorcerers, how they can be co-workers of nature, but they are. Sennett also did not know that all evil co-workers who drop into the eighth sphere to be annihilated, they can remain immortal over there. So his knowledge was that if they are so evil and they drop into the eighth sphere, then they will be totally annihilated. But that is not so. They can remain immortal even in the eighth sphere. This eighth sphere is a more material locality, and there is absolutely no spirituality. Annihilation means that the disembodied spirits, they are separated from their monad forever. And they last in that sphere, which is the world of pure matter, under various material forms for inconceivable lengths of time. And only after that, they return to primeval or cosmic matter. So that is total annihilation. That the material body has returned to primeval matter after aeons and aeons of time, and the connection to their monad is lost forever. So this is not the case with all evil co-workers who fall into this eighth sphere. They can remain immortal even in that sphere. Now, how that can be, we'll see further. The potency for evil, now this Mahatma Ji is telling Sennett. He is saying the potency for evil is as great in man, greater than the potentiality for good. An exception to the rule of nature, that exception, which in the case of adepts and sorcerers, becomes in its turn a rule, has again its own exceptions. Read carefully the passage that CCM left unquoted in this ISIS volume 1. So here Mahatma Ji has clarified that the potential for good and evil, both are there in the average man, and maybe potential for evil is greater, tend to do more of negative things than good things. But there are exceptions, and these exceptions, by supreme effort of their will and spiritual discipline, they can overcome all evil tendencies and they can become adepts. We know this because we have living adepts amongst us. So likewise, there are also those exceptions in whom all the potential for good and spirituality, it is completely eclipsed by their tendency for evil. And such exceptions, they become sorcerers. But again, in the sorcerers also there are exceptions. Those sorcerers who fall into the eighth sphere, there is still a chance that they can be redeemed and reunited with their monad. In the previous slide, we have seen that how there can be exceptions, how they are immortal, even though they are in the eighth sphere. So that is because there is still a chance that they can be redeemed and reunited with their monad. And this is what Madame Blavatsky has written in Isis Unveiled in volume 1 on page 352. She mentions that, now this I'm quoting from Isis Unveiled, when through vice, fearful crimes and animal passions, a disembodied spirit has fallen into the eighth sphere, he can, with the help of that glimpse of reason and consciousness left to him, repent. That is to say that by exercising the remnants of his willpower, he can strive upwards. So in such a sorcerer who's in the eighth sphere, he will still have some remnant of reason and consciousness. And through his willpower, he can strive upwards and reconnect or relink to his monad. Then okay, so in the second point on this slide, further Mahatmaji has mentioned that again she omits to distinctly state that the case mentioned relates but to those powerful sorcerers whose co-partnership with nature for evil affords to them the means of forcing her hand, and thus accords them also pan-ionic immortality. But oh, what kind of immortality, and how preferable is annihilation to their lives. So how these sorcerers can remain immortal? In Isis Unveiled, Madame Blavatsky mentions the case about immortality in evil, but there she has not given the details or explained that how they can be. So Mahatmaji is explaining here that immortality in evil happens to the powerful sorcerers who are partnering with nature in her process of destruction. And through their occult knowledge about the laws of nature, they can utilize these laws to achieve pan-ionic immortality. Because sorcerers have also reached the pinnacle of the highest knowledge. So using these laws, the knowledge of these laws, they can utilize it to achieve pan-ionic immortality. And pan-ionic immortality, as we said earlier, lasts throughout the solar Manvantar. So Mahatmaji says it is preferable to be annihilated than to be immortal, to live throughout the solar Manvantar and working in such evil. He says, don't you see, oh, what kind of immortality and how preferable it is, how preferable is annihilation to their lives. Don't you see that everything you find in Isis is delineated, hardly sketched, nothing completed or fully revealed? Well, the time has come, but where are the co-workers for such a tremendous task? So in her book, Isis Unveiled, which Madame Blavatsky wrote in 1877, the society was formed in 1875, and she came out with this book, Isis Unveiled, in 1877. She gave a critical response to the growing materialism in the society at that time, especially in the scientific and religious institutions of the time. They believed only in materialism. They did not have any concept of consciousness or spirit. And this work was based on whatever knowledge Madame Blavatsky gained from her adept teachers, the Eastern adepts, and their science. So in that book, in Isis Unveiled, she just gave an outline, but she didn't give any detailed explanations to substantiate her responses. To give the kind of explanations, it would have been a mammoth task. And it had to be done because people, just by reading that book, you can see the kind of confusion which Sinnett and C.C. Massey, they were having. So people would also be confused just by reading that because there was no explanation. Even now, people find it very difficult to read Isis Unveiled and gather any meaning from that. So Mahatmaji says that now the time has come to elaborate, to explain but where are the workers for such a tremendous task? And as you all know, it was nearly 10 years afterwards, in 1888, that Madame Blavatsky came out with the secret doctrine, which threw a little more light on those ideas. So this is an indicator to us how we can prepare ourselves to be useful in the master's work. We need not wait to be told by the master what to do. We should qualify ourselves, we should equip ourselves with those qualities by taking initiative for whatever work needs to be done. Like he's mentioning that the time has come, but where are the workers for such a tremendous task? And it is mentioned that the occult law of magnetic affinities, it works in such a way that if you do good work in the name of the master, then that master will be compelled to take note of the aspirant. And along these lines, we should prepare ourselves to work and be useful in the master's work. Next point says Mr. Hume, see affixed letter, mark passages and 1, 2, 3. And now, when you have read the objections to that most unsatisfactory doctrine, as Mr. Hume calls it, a doctrine which you had to learn first as a whole before proceeding to study it in parts. At the risk of satisfying you no better, I will proceed to explain the latter. So this whole doctrine about reincarnation of man, it seemed very unsatisfactory to Hume, including Sinnett. Now we all know that theosophy always starts from the universals to the particular. It follows this top-down approach. So in line with that, Sinnett and Hume were also given the overall picture first, and they didn't find it satisfactory. So further in the letter, Mahatma Ji proceeds to give them the details. Now here there are these 2 slides I have included here. They are not there in the letter. This is just, we are revisiting the constitution of man, because further in the letter, a lot of reference is made to these 7 principles of man. So we know the upper triad or the immortal ego, it consists of the 6th, 7th and 5th principles, that is Atma, Buddhi, Manas. It is indicated as a triangle. And the lower quaternary or the perishable personality, it is comprised of the 4th, 3rd, 2nd and the 1st principles. That is the Kam, Linga Sharir, Pran and Sthul Sharir. So this is as the principles which were shown in Key to Theosophy by Madame Blavatsky. And we know what is the meaning of each of these principles. The Atma, that is the radiation of the Absolute. That is our 7th principle. It is the pure spirit. Buddhi, which is the spiritual soul, it is the vehicle of Atma. Manas, which is dual in its functionality, it links the monad to the mortal man, the lower quaternary. The 4th principle, Kam, it is our animal soul, the seat of animal desire and passion. The Linga Sharir, it is our astral double. The 2nd principle, Pran, that is our life principle. It is the vital principle. And the first one, Sthul Sharir, it is the physical body. So keep in mind these when we are studying this letter. Now Mahatma Ji proceeds to answer Hume's question from letter 70A. So this is the question from Hume. He says, our first doctrine is that the majority of objective phenomena were due to shells, 1.5 and 2.5 principal shells. That is, principles entirely separated from their 6th and 7th principles. Now what Hume is saying here, the shells are what remains of the deceased person when the ego has departed to Devachan. After physical death, higher and lower principles separate. Ego goes into Devachan. And what is left is the shell. Shell is no more than a residue of the lower vehicles of the personality that was living. But it may have some residual consciousness and retain some characteristics of that deceased person. These shells are called Kamrup. And by half principle, Hume may be trying to refer to the lower manas, because some part of lower manas, it galvanizes the desires, which forms the Kamrup. So it is not the complete manas, it is only the lower manas which is remains enmeshed in calm. That is why he says either 1.5 or 2.5. And the phenomena in the seance rooms, it is largely due to these shells. These shells, they take up the matter particles, they reclothe themselves with substance coming from the medium and perhaps from the audience also. And they may be enlivened by elementals to some extent. They may appear like lifelike, ephemeral likeness of the deceased person. And Hume says, but as further development, we admit that there are some spirits, that is fifth and fourth principles. Now, which are the fifth and fourth principles? Fifth is manas, that is human soul, and fourth is calm. So there are some spirits, that is fifth and fourth principles, not wholly dissevered from their sixth and seventh. Sixth and seventh are Atma Buddhi, which may also be potent in the seance room. These are the spirits of suicides and victims of accident or violence. So above cases of shells, they occur when the higher self or ego has separated from the lower principles and gone into Devachan. But there may also be disembodied spirits of people who die due to suicide or due to accidents. So their ego, it does not get separated from the lower principles. The Atma Buddhi Manas, it has not got separated from the lower quaternary, including calm and the lower manas. So in this case, they are not mere shells, but they are disembodied conscious spirits because they still are retaining their fifth and fourth principles. And Hume adds, here the doctrine is that each particular wave of life must run on to its appointed shore. And with the exception of the very good, that all spirits prematurely divorced from the lower principles must remain on earth until the foredestined hour of what would have been the natural death strikes. Now this is all very well, but this being so, it is clear that in opposition to our former doctrine, shells will be few and spirits many. So this is Hume's premise, that there will be, in the seance room, there will be more spirits because the people who have died due to accident or due to suicide, they are conscious disembodied spirits because their higher principles have not separated. So how can this be explained? To this, Mahatma Ji is replying now. He says, although not wholly dissevered from their sixth and seventh principles, and quite potent in the seance room, nevertheless, to the day when they would have died a natural death, they are separated from the higher principles by a gulf. I'll explain this at the end. The sixth and seventh remain passive and negative, whereas in case of accidental death, the higher and the lower groups mutually attract each other. In cases of good and innocent egos, moreover, the latter gravitates irresistibly towards the sixth and seventh, and thus either slumbers surrounded by happy dreams or sleeps in a dreamless, profound sleep until the hour strikes. Now, what does this mean here in the first point? The disembodied spirits who have not lost the link to their monad, that is Atma Buddhi, they may be present in the seance room. That is true. But there is an unbridgeable gap in reaching them or for them to communicate with anybody in the seance room, because such spirits, their Atma Buddhi, it remains passive and negative because they are in the world of effects. In the world of effects, these higher principles will remain passive and negative. They can be active and positive only in the world of causes, which is this physical earth when they are in their lifetime. So during the lifetime of the person, but not after his death. And in case of accident victims, the lower principles, they are attracted by the ego. It is a disembodied but conscious spirit. So these lower principles are also attracted by the higher principles in case of accident victims. if the death was not the fault of the individual, because it was an accident. So if it was not his fault and he was a good person, then these lower principles, attracted by the higher principles, they also enter into a passive state of dreamless sleep or happy dreams. So they also cannot remain active in Sian's room and communicate with anybody in that room. With a little reflection and an eye to the eternal justice and fitness of things, you will see why the victim, whether good or bad, is responsible for his death, even if his death were due to some action in a previous life or an antecedent birth. Antecedent meaning previous birth. Was an act, in short, of the law of retribution. Still, it was not the direct result of an act deliberately committed by the personal ego of that life during which he happened to be killed. So this scenario, it explained in the case of accident victim. What happens is that due to the fact that the individual was not directly responsible for his own death because it was an accident, but still it is possible that the accident was a result of his previous karma. We say that the law of karma, it is universal and it is unerring. So whatever circumstances happen in this life, whether it is accident or suicide, that also has to be due to the result of some act or some cause which was previously created. Yes, that is true. But in this particular life, an accident may not be the direct doing of this person. It happened as an accident. Had he been allowed to live longer, he may have atoned for his antecedent sins still more effectually. And even now, the ego, having been made to pay off the debt of his maker is the previous ego. So now he's free from the blows of retributive justice. What this means is that if that accident would not have taken place, then the person would have lived longer. And it is possible that he could have paid off his karma by continuing life and by repenting, doing repentance. But now that his life is cut short by accident, it implies that he has already paid off the karma because he met the result of his karma. He met with an accident. His life is cut short and justice has been served. So that karma has been paid off. So now the individual is free of that debt and he is entitled to sweet slumber. That is why even though it is a conscious spirit, it will go into sweet slumber along with the higher principles. So those previous slides, they were important to understand what happens in case of suicides and accident victims, how their principles are dormant, can they communicate or not communicate. Now further, Mahatma Ji mentions the Dhyan Chauhans who have no hand in the guiding of the living human ego protect the helpless victim when it is violently thrust out of its element into a new one before it is matured and made fit and ready for it. It is violently thrust out, meaning victims of accident and suicide. It was not their time to die, but by some rash act, accidentally or deliberately, their life has been extinguished and they have been thrown out of the physical body into the other elements, other principles. So these Dhyan Chauhans, they are the hosts or the hierarchies of celestial beings, and they are of many types. Like we know that there are the primordial 7 Dhyan Chauhans, or there are the Lipiks, and there are also the Manas Putra or the Kumars. Then there are Manus for every round. So these are all hierarchies of Dhyan Chauhans. And some of such Dhyan Chauhans, they watch over the planet and they watch over the life that is evolving on that planet. They do not influence in any way the life that is evolving, the egos which are carrying on their journey. They don't influence those egos, but they protect those egos if they are prematurely pushed out of their world into the world that lies beyond the physical world. which happens in cases of these accidents. And this they do so that the disembodied spirit may safely bide its time till the appointed hour of its natural death. We tell you what we know. This Mahatma Ji is saying, we tell you all this. How do we know that Dhyan Chauhans are looking after those victims who are prematurely pushed to their death? Because Mahatma Ji is saying, we tell you what we know, for we are made to learn it through personal experience. You know what I mean, and I can say no more. Now, this is a very revealing statement, what Mahatma Ji is giving, but he doesn't say anymore. It means that the initiates, when they are aspiring for adeptship, they are made to go through such events so that they learn the higher truths by experience. That is what he said. We are made to learn it through personal experience. And he adds, yes, the victims, whether good or bad, sleep, to awake but at the hour of the last judgment, which is that hour of the supreme struggle between the sixth and seventh, and the fifth and fourth at the threshold of the gestation state. And even after that, when the sixth and seventh, carrying off a portion of the fifth, have gone into their Akashic Samadhi, even then it may happen that the spiritual spoil from the fifth will prove too weak to be reborn in Devachan. Now all this 6, 7, 5th, 4th, these are the principles. That is why we had seen that slide which mentioned all the principles of human constitution. In which case it will there and then reclothe itself in a new body, the subjective being created from the karma of the victim or no victim as the case may be, and enter upon a new earth existence, whether upon this or any other planet. So here again we are talking about the accident victims. They become disembodied, and these disembodied beings of accident victim, they remain in the sleep state till the hour of their natural death strikes. Had they lived their complete life, then when their natural death would come, so till that time they remain in a sleep state. And as per the normal process after death, there is a struggle for separation between the upper duad, that is the Atma Buddhi, and the lower principles, that is Kam and Manas. So when that period is over, what would have been their natural life? So at the end of that period, they will also undergo the struggle of separation of the higher principles from the lower. After this, the Atma Buddhi, along with the higher Manas, that means their ego, it will also go into gestation. So this gestation period is called the Akashic Samadhi. But it may so happen that after gestation, the ego is not able to be reborn in Devachan. Now, this is a particular case of accident victim. After it has been dormant, it may not be able to awake in Devachan because Devachanic period is proportionate to the spiritual and noble karma, which are assimilated through the higher manas into the buddhi. But since the life was cut short due to an accident, then there might not have been sufficient time to create sufficient good karma to have a proportionate devachanic period. Because to be able to create good karma, he should have lived at least a certain period of life. But if the life was cut short very early, then perhaps he did not create sufficient good karma, which will enable him to have a reasonable devachanic period. So this is possible even for a person who dies a natural death. Because in natural death also, if he has not done anything good in life, he won't have anything to assimilate into his higher principles. And this is more so in case of accident victims. In such cases, the ego, it immediately takes on a new mental body. See, ego is Atma, Buddhi and higher manas. So it is Arup. Okay. But what it will do in such cases where there is no devachanic period, it will immediately take on a new mental body, meaning the lower mental, which is the root level of existence. So it will take on a new mental body without enjoying any Devachanic period, because no good deeds, no good karma were performed. And this subjective mental body is formed as per the skand. We have read about skand in theosophic literature. The skands, they are the bundle of mental impressions due to his karma, and they are attached to the ego by magnetic affinity. As soon as the ego is ready to be reborn, then these skands, which are nothing but bundle of mental impressions, so they will be attracted and they will attach to this ego due to magnetic affinity. And then the ego will descend to incarnate on this earth or any other planet. And it will assume the Linga Sharir and the Sthul Sharir, and it will come into incarnation. So it may not have any Devachanic period. In no case then, with the exception of suicides and shells, is there any possibility for any other to be attached to a seance room? And it is clear that this teaching is not in opposition to our former doctrine, and that while shells may be many, spirits very few. Mahatma Ji is again reiterating that in the seance room, the phenomena, there will always be many shells, but spirits are very few. So all the cases that have been examined, let us see. The first case, which was of normal death. So ego, in such a case of normal death, ego meaning Atma, Buddhi and higher manas. Okay, it goes into gestation and the shell wanders around it till it naturally disintegrates. Then in the second case, that is in case of accident victim, the physical body is lost, but all the remaining lower principles together with the ego, they enter into a peaceful sleep. And they are protected by the Dhyani Chauhans up to the appointed hour of natural death. So this is the second case of accidental victims. And the third case of suicide victims, the disembodied being is conscious and he suffers. But in this world of effects, the Atma Buddhi remains passive and dormant. So there is an unbridgeable gap between Atma Buddhi and the lower principles. So all this makes it very clear that only shells and suicide victims can be attracted to the seance room. And as compared to shells, spirits will be very few because there are lesser suicides than natural deaths. That is but natural. So this is the clarification which Mahatma Ji has given to Hume for his question about how the phenomena of seance room, why it cannot be due to intelligent spirits. Okay? And neither natural deaths, nor suicide victims, nor accidental victims. Now, the next question from Hume, maybe I will take 1 or 2 slides more and then we can stop for this session. So, Hume has another question. For what difference can there be to take the case of suicides, whether these be conscious or unconscious, whether the man blows his brain out or only drinks or womanizes himself to death, or kills himself by overstudy. In each case, equally the normal natural hour of death is anticipated, and a spirit and not a shell the result. So Hume is continuing on his idea that whatever is the manner of suicide, the life is extinguished before the appointed hour. So conscious spirit must bide its time till the hour of natural death. And he says, or again, what difference does it make whether a man is hung for murder, killed in battle, in a railway train or a powder explosion, or drowned or burnt to death, or knocked over by some cholera, plague, or jungle fever, or any of the other 1001 epidemics. So for him, death is death. And that person has to continue to bide his time till the appointed hour of natural death. So in all those different manners of dying, and the last one he spoke about, the epidemics. So he says the seeds of that epidemic, which were not ab initio in his constitution, but when introduced, there in consequence of his happening to visit a particular locality or undergo a given experience, both of which he might have avoided. Equally, in all cases, the normal death hour is anticipated and a spirit instead of a shell, the result. So Hume is feeling very strongly that there is no difference between suicide cases and victims of accident, irrespective of the manner of their death. Ultimately, all these untimely deaths must result in disembodied spirits, not shells. And these disembodied spirits must communicate in seance rooms. You can see the kind of atmosphere which was prevalent in that time, in those 1800s and 80s and 90s, especially in that European region and in all of the Western region. Communication with the spirit was very, very common, and people used to participate in all this. And they had this kind of misconceived idea that real spirits are talking uh, because they are intelligent, they have their higher principles still with them. And Mahatma Ji is trying to correct their misunderstanding that no, it cannot be so. This is not the case. So this letter is entirely about clearing that misconception. And Hume continues his question. He keeps saying that in England, it is calculated that not 15% of the population reach their normal death period. And what with fevers and famine and their sequels. So due to all these causes, less than 15% live their full lifetime. The others die prematurely. I fear the percentage is not much larger here even, meaning in India, where the people are mostly vegetarian and as a rule live under less unfavorable sanitary conditions. So he says due to this vegetarianism, they don't get enough nutrition. They are they don't have enough nutrition, malnourished, and also they live under unfavorable sanitary conditions, which is cause of more deaths. So in India also, there should be people who die before their appointed lifetime. So then the great bulk of all physical phenomena of spiritualists ought apparently to be due to these spirits and not to shells. I should be glad to have further information on this point. So how misconceived Hume's ideas were, and he's asking Mahatma Ji that these large percentage of population in England, they are meeting their untimely death due to disease and famine. And these numbers, they should be greater in India because of poor nutrition and poor hygiene. And therefore, spirits must definitely be more than shells. It is as if some kind of survey and some statistics he has gathered that why spirits should be more than the shells. And these spirits should communicate with the mediums and cause all the phenomena that is observed in the seance room. Now, this is just as I explained that see what even the thinking pattern of educated people like Sinnett and Hume was. They got misled or they misconceived the teachings which were being given to them. And they held such strong views about all these reincarnation and death. So this is a pointer for us. We must examine our own views and beliefs that we hold in any field. And we should hold our views lightly. For whatever we are knowing or studying, it is not the whole truth. So with this, I will come to a stop for today's session. In the further session, Mahatma Ji has given the answers to Hume's questions, which we have just seen. And now for the Hindi translation. Today, Meenakshi Ji is not able to attend the session, but she has sent me the video of her Hindi translation, which I am going to share with you now. So please allow me a moment.
नमस्ते। प्रश्न उत्तर की श्रृंखला में अब हम आगे बढ़ते हैं। सिनेट का प्रश्न है, लेकिन फिर भी क्या ऐसा विचार कर सकते हैं कि एक स्पिरिचुअल मोनार्क हालांकि अपने तीसरे और चौथे राउंड के पेजेस की अस्वीकृति से बचता है, वह पांचवें और छठवें राउंड के पेजेस के अस्वीकृति से बच नहीं सकता। इन राउंड्स में सदा
no video, only audio is coming.
संपूर्ण व्यक्तित्व का विनाश होना, जो फिर कभी भी सातवें राउंड तक नहीं पहुंचेगा।
Vivaji, no picture.
देते हैं।
Okay,
निश्चित ही यह
just a moment.
अचिंतनीय है, इसीलिए इस विषय पर चर्चा करने का कोई उपयोग नहीं है। आगे सीनेट का प्रश्न है, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ अगर ऐसा होता तो एलिफास लेवी के विचार इस तरह की परिकल्पना से नहीं होते। बहुत पहले ही जो व्यक्ति बुराई के लिए
Okay, I'll try to share it once again.
Yes,
Please.
yes.
नमस्ते। प्रश्न उत्तर की श्रृंखला में अब हम आगे बढ़ते हैं। सीनेट का प्रश्न है, लेकिन फिर भी क्या ऐसा विचार कर सकते हैं कि एक स्पिरिचुअल मोनार्ड हालांकि अपने तीसरे और चौथे राउंड के पेजेस
It's given only audios, I think.
है, वह पांचवें और छठवें राउंड के पेजेस के अस्वीकृति से बच नहीं सकता। इन राउंड्स में सदाचारी जीवन जीने में असफलता यानी उस संपूर्ण व्यक्तित्व का विनाश होना जो फिर कभी भी सातवें राउंड तक नहीं पहुंचेगा। इस पर मास्टर आंसर देते हैं।
Vibhaji, no video is coming. So I think her only audio is available.
Audio is clear. Let it go.
Yes, sir. Then, no, just inquiring whether Vibhaji has her audio or only video, I don't know. Okay, if video is not clear, not available, then we can play the audio also. There is some technical problem.
The file is only audio.
आइसिस के वॉल्यूम 1 पेज नंबर 352 353।
The files are the only audio.
Sir, are you able to hear the audio?
Yes, you can play that audio only. No
Okay,
problem.
okay, I'll continue.
3 के पैराग्राफ 3 ध्यान पूर्वक पढ़े, जिसे सीसी मैसी ने उल्लेखित नहीं किया है। एचपीबी ने पुनः यह स्पष्ट रूप से बताने के लिए उल्लेख नहीं किया कि उल्लेखित बात उन शक्तिशाली वामपंथियों से संबंधित है जिनकी बुराई के लिए सृष्टि के साथ सहसाझेदारी से वे उसे बाध्य कर सकते हैं और इस तरह उन्हें युगों युगों तक अमरत्व भी प्रदान करता है। ओह, लेकिन यह कैसी अमरता है और उनके जीवन के लिए विलोपन किस प्रकार से ठीक है? क्या आप यह नहीं देख सकते कि आइसिस में जो कुछ भी आप पढ़ते हैं वह शायद ही रूपरेखा
Vibhaji, let us stop this Hindi speech. We will do
या
that
पढ़ने
in the
वालों
next
की
session
और
on 7.
दुर्घटना या हिंसा के
Okay.
शिकार वालों की आदि।
Okay, sir.
Let us any question or any discussion if anyone have, that can be continued.
Okay. So if anybody is having any questions on these concepts which we have just seen, then they may please unmute their mic and we can discuss on these points. Now, in the next time, we will be completing all these 3 letters. So we will have all the answers from the Mahatma. And then maybe at the end, if there are any further questions, then we can take up. Because I don't see anyone is having any doubt. So everyone is clear. Now, these 2-3 letters, which previous one also, which Shikharji took, letter number 68, that was also the Devachanik letter. It gave a lot of information about the after death states. And this letter also, it is giving all the answers about what happens in special cases of suicides and accidental victims. And of course, the natural deaths, which keep happening.
There are some points. Yes.
Yes.
Now, one point you mentioned regarding this, some egos are saved by higher forces. Some egos before either before accident or before suicide, like Animation was saved by her teacher while she was going to commit suicide. In that case also, if the great ones are interested for any individual who are going to be face any kind of accident or any kind of or any mental stress is there, going to commit suicide or something like that. Some invisible helpers also help to save the person from facing the accident or some kind of death. It so happened, there is a book in Invisible Helpers. There are many invisible helpers in the nature. They help individual to survive. I think that was mentioned by Mahatma while giving hints to Hume, I think.
Sir, that is one point which you are saying. Yes, I also have read about Annie Besant's incident, like when she had this thought of suicide. And another point which they have mentioned in the letter, that it is after the death of the victim, who is the victim of an accident. So it was not his fault he died. And he has been thrust out of his physical element into these elements of the other world, the world of effects. There are many evil or bad influences which can harm such a victim. So the Dhyan Chauhans, they protect such a victim till the time of his natural death would have arrived. Till that hour, he is protected and he remains in a sleeping state. So this is what I understood from the letter. And once the natural hour arrives, then he will undergo the normal process of separation of lower principles from higher principles. And this Mahatma Ji is saying that they have learned from experience. It means when they are going for this process of initiation, adeptship, then such kind of experiences are given to the aspirant or the initiate. This is what I understood from that statement. So it is during the post-mortem period that they are protected, which means that in the post-mortem period, there can be evil influences which harm the disembodied spirit. I don't know if somebody else would like to add. It was my understanding. Perhaps someone else can share their understanding.
Professor C.S. Sindhe ji are there.
Yes. Yes.
Sir, would you like to add something?
I'm not adding anything because Vibhaji has explained very nicely. No problem. Only Vibhaji, I will ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought why it is said, let the soul rest in peace?
Rest in peace. Yeah, that is the state of post-mortem state.
Yeah.
So that would be the meaning that he is protected in his post-mortem state. He is peaceful.
Is it not the period of gestation, Devachanic period? And in that, remolding of our experiences
Mhm.
for next reincarnation is going on. So he must have that rest in peace so that he can get more time for that.
True.
That is what I think. That is what I
True.
think so. Okay,
True.
then. Very nice. You have explained all that need to be contemplated. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That this period of gestation, I just remember the discussion between Annie Besant and Sido Lidbiter. When Mahatma told Sido Lidbiter, met previous life, that we will meet again. In between 1,000 years or more passed, and Mahatma met Master in this life. Whereas Annie Besant, in between past several 2 or 3 incarnations. So the karma which Annie Besant exhausted during that period, whereas C.W. Littlefitter has maybe it is his own karma which he has not exhausted because in between this gestation period. So for the Theosophical Society, you see Annie Besant is in a better position. No doubt both are the higher level of initiated. They are doing the work of Theosophical Society. But Annie Besant, in comparison to Annie Besant, she was the president, she was the writer, she was the orator, and innumerable works she has been doing. Whereas C.W. Littlefitter, he wrote a lot of books, but in the other side, the personal side, he faced a lot of criticism, a lot of character assassination. He was removed twice from Theosophical Society. When he asked Annie Besant, so this period of gestation, Annie Besant told that in between I have passed 2, 3 lives, whereas you have not passed any life, not existed karma. So, sir, the karma and gestation, something is there, mystical thing which one to ponder over.
Yes, if you have more karma to work out, you will be having very less gestation period. Immediately you are again sent to the lower worlds to work out that karma. So remaining in Devachanik, it is a Swarga after all. So let the soul rest in peace in the sense he must work out all the karma in the lower world so that he can have a good peace, and where a further addition of faculties, etc. will be added. So that period is required, Devachanic period is required for adding more faculties and to develop. That is what I think. Something we must contemplate on it. Thank you. You told about the Annie Besant also, but all these leaders are much evolved. We cannot reach to that level. Thank you.
Sir, one sister from Italy, she joined, she is a friend of Devasis Patnaik. Sister Valentina, would you like to add something?
Hi, I would like to add something, but I'm kind of shy to say anything at the moment. But I very appreciate everything, and I promise to assimilate what has been taught and contemplate on it.
Right. Thank you, Sister Francesca Valentina, right? Thank you
Yeah,
for coming.
I'm Italian American. I come from Italy and also United States.
Okay.
I'm a mix. So thanks again.
Most welcome. Nice to have you on our forum, and we would expect to hear from you also, maybe next time. Okay. Anyone else would like to say something? Sister Sheetal Gole always has some questions. I think she's not here today. Okay. Okay, great. So we can close now, sir, I think.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And let us close today's session with the closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastirabhavatu Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you all.